The sun was unforgiving that afternoon in the Nevada desert, casting long shadows between the red rocks and scorching every inch of exposed ground. Andrew Miles, 38, moved with practiced ease through the dry brush, checking a line of humane traps set to monitor local wildlife. His shirt clung to his back, soaked in sweat, his skin bronzed by years under the open sky. This was his domain, solitary, vast and quiet, until the silence cracked. A faint voice floated on the wind, barely audible. A whisper of pain. "Help someone, please." Andrew froze. Every instinct in him sharpened. That was not the wind. That was a human voice. He grabbed his emergency kit from his pack and started toward the sound, weaving through rocks and spiky sagebrush. His boots kicked up dust as his pace quickened. Then he saw her. A woman, collapsed at the edge of a narrow trail, one hand clutching her leg. She was trembling, gasping, her face pale under the desert sun. Her wide-brimmed hat lay discarded nearby, and sweat soaked the front of her simple tank top. "Mom," Andrew shouted as he ran to her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. "Please help me." Snake it bit. "Okay, stay calm," he said, kneeling beside her. "Where's the bite?" "Leg left, can't breathe." Andrew quickly located the wound just above her ankle. 2 small punctures, already red and swelling. Without hesitation, he pulled gloves from his kit, sanitized the area, and used a suction tool to begin extracting venom. Every movement was controlled, efficient. "Stay with me," he said. "I'm going to help you." "My name's Andrew. You're going to be okay." The woman whimpered, barely nodding. Her breathing was shallow. He pulled out his radio, switching to the emergency frequency. "Dispatch, this is Station 6. I've got a snake bite victim, female, mid-30s, en route to Trail 9 East Ridge. Vitals are unstable. Request immediate medical evac." "Copy that, Station 6. Chopper dispatched." ETA 12 minutes. Andrew turned back to the woman. Her eyes were drifting closed. Hey, no sleeping on me. Talk to me." "What's your name?" She didn't answer. He looked down, noting the fine chain around her neck. A necklace, delicate, expensive-looking, with a single sapphire pendant. It glinted even in the dimming light. He frowned. She was dressed plainly, hiking shorts, trail shoes, and a dusty tank top. But that necklace didn't belong to someone who shopped at the local outdoor outlet. It was custom. It screamed wealth. But Andrew pushed the thought aside. "Okay," he said, forcing a calm tone. "Let's keep that mind of yours working. You ever seen a desert tortoise? No? You're missing out. Slow little guy, but stubborn. Kinda like me." The woman's lips twitched slightly. A near smile. "I once tracked one for 5 days just to get a tag on it." 5 days? That tortoise made me question my life choices. He kept talking, voice even and steady, watching her pupils, her breath. She whispered, almost too soft to hear. "Hurts, I know," he said gently, "but help's coming. You're not alone." Minutes passed like hours, until the distant chop of a helicopter broke the silence. Relief surged through Andrew's chest as the emergency team landed nearby and rushed in. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, her hand shot out weakly, grabbing his. Her eyes locked onto his with startling clarity. "Thank you, you're my angel." And then she was gone, whisked into the sky. Andrew stood alone on the trail, his hand still tingling from her touch, heart pounding. He watched the helicopter fade into the blue, questions swirling. Who was she? What was she doing alone out here? And why did he care so much about a stranger? He picked up her hat and slipped it into his pack without thinking. Later that night, back at his ranger station, Andrew sat by the radio, the hum of silence wrapping around him once more. But something inside him had shifted. He could not stop thinking about her eyes, her voice, that necklace. He knew the desert better than anyone. But in one afternoon, a stranger had made him feel completely lost, and he was not sure he wanted to find his way back just yet. The desert was stirring with more than wind. For days after the rescue, Andrew could not shake the image of the woman on the trail, her breath faltering, her hand clutching his, the weight of her whisper, "You're my angel." He had saved dozens of hikers over the years, but something about her stayed with him. Her voice, her necklace, her name. He had returned to the hospital in Reno 3 days later, just to check, just to be sure, but she was gone. The nurse at the front desk gave him a puzzled look. She left yesterday, checked herself out early, said she had meetings to attend. "She didn't leave a number?" Andrew asked. The nurse handed him a small, cream-colored card. "Heavy stock. minimal design. Evelyn Harper. There was no title, no phone number, just the name and a logo embossed in silver, a sleek H encircled by a thin desert sun. Andrew held it for a long moment, frowning. That name, it tugged at something. Back at the ranger station, he booted up the old desktop computer and typed Evelyn Harper into the search bar. It took only seconds. Evelyn Harper, president and CEO of Harper Group International. Billionaire, real estate mogul, environmental philanthropist, at least on paper. Currently overseeing the controversial Oasis Ridge Resort, a sprawling luxury development planned for the eastern edge of the Nevada desert, just miles from protected wildlife corridors. Andrew leaned back, stunned. The woman he had pulled from the dirt, who whispered for help and cried in pain, was not a tourist or a lost hiker. She was the force behind the very project threatening to carve up the land he spent his life protecting. He clicked through news articles and press photos. In every image, Evelyn stood poised, polished, her jaw set like she was always bracing for battle. She looked powerful, intimidating, untouchable. Not at all like the woman he met on the trail, trembling and gasping, holding on to life and on to him. He remembered her murmuring between ragged breaths, "I just want to be free." It haunted him. What did a billionaire need to be free from? Andrew stared out the window of his office at the desert stretching beyond. It did not make sense. Either she was hiding something, or there was more to her than the world saw. And yet, the facts were right there. Evelyn Harper, the face behind Oasis Ridge. The name causing panic in every wildlife conservation circle from Nevada to Arizona. Andrew felt the old rage simmer in his chest. That resort would devastate everything, disrupting migration paths, poisoning groundwater, pushing species closer to extinction. He had written letters, attended town halls, protested with signs and petitions. Now he had touched the pulse of the very person responsible, and she had seemed so human, so vulnerable. Could it have all been an act? He felt torn in two, between the memory of her hand in his and the headlines that painted her as another careless tycoon. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, then turned back to the computer. He opened his email. Typed a short message to the contact listed on the Harper Group website. Subject: meeting request, personal follow-up from Nevada Wildlife Ranger. Message: Dear Ems. Harper, we met briefly during a medical emergency in the Nevada desert. I was the wildlife ranger who assisted you. I'd like to speak with you about the Oasis Ridge project and its environmental impact. If possible, I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet you in person. Respectfully, Andrew Miles, Nevada Wildlife Station 6. He hesitated only a second before hitting send. He expected silence, or a polite rejection, maybe a generic corporate reply. But less than 2 hours later, his inbox pinged. From Evelyn Harper, Executive Assistant. Subject: RE meeting request. Dear Mr. Miles, thank you for reaching out. Miss Harper is scheduled to attend a community roundtable this Friday evening in Carson Springs regarding Oasis Ridge. She invites you to join as her guest. We'll have a reserved seat for you. Warm regards, Claralyn. Office of Evelyn Harper. Andrew stared at the screen. So she was not hiding then. She was stepping into the fire. He shut the laptop, stood up slowly, and glanced out at the endless stretch of sun-baked earth. The desert had given him a stranger to save. Now it was giving him a chance to demand the truth, and he planned to take it. The community center buzzed with cautious energy. Folding chairs were filled, coffee urns bubbled in the back, and the walls were lined with maps, renderings, and charts of the Oasis Ridge Resort. Most attendees were local residents, farmers, environmentalists, faces drawn with suspicion and fatigue. Andrew stood near the back, arms crossed. He had dressed plainly: jeans, boots, ranger badge still clipped to his belt. No one paid him much attention until she walked in. Evelyn Harper entered with quiet confidence. Her long coat was charcoal gray, tailored perfectly to her frame, her heels soft against the linoleum floor. Her hair was neatly pinned, her makeup understated but flawless. A far cry from the dirt-streaked, half-conscious woman he had cradled in the sand. Yet her eyes, those stayed the same. She took the podium with practiced poise. Her voice was steady, clear. I want to begin by thanking this community for its patience and for showing up tonight. And I'd also like to personally thank someone very important, Mr. Andrew Miles. Without his quick action last week, I might not be standing here today. All eyes turned to Andrew. He shifted uncomfortably as she nodded toward him with genuine gratitude. A few people clapped. Andrew gave a curt nod but said nothing. After the meeting, as the crowd thinned, Evelyn approached him. "Glad you came," she said, offering a small smile. "You clean up well," he replied, his voice more guarded than he intended. She laughed softly. "You look exactly as I remember." They ended up at a quiet cafe nearby, tucked into a booth where Evelyn removed her gloves and set aside her phone. "I needed a break," she said, wrapping her hands around a steaming mug. "That day in the desert, I wasn't there on business. I was running. Just for a few hours. No calls, no meetings, just silence. And then, well, you know the rest." Andrew studied her. "You always run through rattlesnake country." "I didn't think I'd go that far. I just kept walking." He nodded. "I get that." There was a pause. "I meant what I said," Evelyn continued. "I know Oasis Ridge scares people. But I want it to be different, sustainable, low impact, good for the community. I've hired consultants, environmental planners. We're working with conservationists." Andrew's brow furrowed. "Then why here? Why build so close to protected land?" "Because people want to experience nature," she said. "And if we don't guide how that happens, someone else will. Someone who cares less." Andrew didn't answer right away. Something about her words felt sincere but rehearsed, polished. He glanced down as she reached into her bag to pull out her wallet. A stack of documents shifted in her open purse. One page caught his eye. It was stamped confidential. Oasis Ridge Phase 2 Proposal Water Extraction Analysis. A line highlighted in yellow read, "Proposed well depth may impact nearby aquifers feeding into protected habitat zones." Andrew's stomach dropped. He looked up at Evelyn, fury tightening his voice. "You told them this would be sustainable." Her smile faded. "What?" He reached into her bag and pulled the document out. "This says your wells could poison the underground water that feeds the entire corridor." Her face went pale. "Andrew, that's you lied," he said, standing. "To me, to everyone in that room." She rose too, voice tense. "That's an old proposal. We scrapped it months ago. Then why is it in your bag?" "Because I keep copies of everything. I was reviewing it with legal this morning. I promise you it's not the final plan." Andrew stepped back. "No, I've seen this before. Fancy words, pretty promises, then drills in the dirt." "I'm not your enemy," she said quietly. "Then stop acting like one." She reached out. "Andrew, wait," but he was already heading for the door. "I don't want your thanks. And I sure as hell don't want your job." He left without looking back. That night, as he sat in the ranger station, the desert wind howling outside, his phone buzzed. "Evelyn Harper, please read this. The document you found is outdated. I can prove it. I want you to see what we're actually building." Then another. "You saved my life. I would never repay that by lying to you. Please let me explain." Andrew stared at the screen. He wanted to ignore it, but her voice, tired, frightened, human, lingered in his mind. And deep down he wondered, what if she was telling the truth? The desert had always been Andrew's escape, a place of quiet, where the silence was so complete it could drown even the loudest thoughts. But lately, not even the wind brushing through the Joshua trees could quiet his mind. Back on patrol, he moved through the familiar terrain, checking animal traps, logging sightings, monitoring water sources, but his steps felt heavier. His thoughts lingered not on the footprints of coyotes or the return of the jackrabbit population, but on her. Evelyn Harper. He had tried to forget her, tried to put the confrontation behind him, but her voice, soft, clear, and shaking that night in the cafe, still echoed inside him. So did the way she had looked when she reached out and he pulled away. He wanted to believe he had done the right thing, walking out, that she had earned it. But the truth was, he missed her. And more than that, he was not sure anymore if he had been fair. One afternoon, while replacing a broken motion sensor near a watering hole, his old friend Tom pulled up in a dusty pickup. Tom was a field biologist who had worked in the region for over a decade, with a reputation for hating developers more than snakes. "Did you hear about the funding that came through for the canyon restoration project?" Tom asked, climbing down with a thermos of coffee. "Yeah," Andrew replied, surprised anyone's backing it. "That thing's been stalled for years," Tom chuckled. "You'll like this. Guess who put up most of the money?" Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Harper Group. Anonymous donation, but someone leaked it. Turns out Evelyn Harper's been quietly funding more than a few conservation programs. Reforestation, aquifer studies, even habitat corridors in Arizona." Andrew stared at him. "You're kidding." "Nope. She's not the devil everyone thinks. Might be the first developer I've seen who actually gives a damn." Andrew said nothing, but inside, something shifted. That night, when he got back to the ranger station, he found a small package waiting at the door. Brown paper, no return address, just his name, handwritten. Inside was a book, The Hidden Life of Desert Creatures. A field guide, old but well cared for. Tucked inside the front cover was a note, "I still owe you a proper explanation." I thought maybe this could be a start. He turned the pages slowly. About halfway through, a piece of folded paper slipped out. Not typed. Handwritten, in soft blue ink. "Dear Andrew, when you pulled me off that trail, I was not just scared because of the bite. I was scared because, for the first time in years, I was somewhere I did not control. Somewhere that didn't bend to my name or my wealth. But you didn't treat me like a billionaire. You treated me like a person. Maybe the only person who has done that in a long time. I grew up far from boardrooms and resorts. I grew up in foster homes in borrowed clothes, watching my mother work night shifts. She barely survived. My dream was never to build empires, it was to build a place where people could feel safe. Feel still. Feel wonder. Like I did, in the desert that first summer I spent with a foster family who actually let me roam. I never forgot it. I know what you saw in my bag looked bad. I should have explained it better. I was angry too. I get it. But I swear to you I'm trying to do this right, not just for the company. For me. For the land. For everyone." Evelyn Andrew finished the letter with a lump in his throat. He sat for a long time, the book resting on his knees. Had he been wrong? Had he let his anger speak louder than the truth? The next morning he made a decision. He drove east, past the edge of the reserve, into the city, and toward the Harper Group headquarters. A high rise of steel and glass stood tall above the sprawl. Inside, sleek marble floors stretched beneath his boots as he stepped off the elevator. "Andrew Miles," he said to the receptionist. "I'm here to see Evelyn Harper." She smiled nervously. "I'll check." "Please wait a moment." As Andrew stood by the large windows overlooking the city, he could hear raised voices down the hall. Not Evelyn's, but others. "It's already behind schedule. We cannot afford another delay. Sustainable features are cutting into the budget. Either we move or we lose our investors." He turned toward the hallway just as a door opened. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her jaw tight, her face pale. She looked exhausted, but when she saw him, something in her eyes changed. Surprise, relief, maybe even hope. But Andrew could see it clearly now. She was under fire. Surrounded by pressure. Cornered by people who saw nature as nothing more than a spreadsheet. And yet, she had still sent him a book. Still written him a letter. Still wanted to make things right. He took a step forward. "I think it's time we talked," he said. And for the first time, Evelyn let her shoulders fall. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think so too." In the weeks that followed, the tone around Oasis Ridge shifted. Tension remained, but there was something else growing too, possibility. Evelyn and Andrew began working together, cautiously at first, like two people still healing from a fracture neither of them could quite name. But they shared a goal now, reimagine the resort not as a threat to the desert, but as a part of it. A harmony instead of a conquest. They redrew plans with the architects, replacing pavement with raised paths to protect animal crossings. Evelyn insisted on solar panels and natural water recycling systems. Andrew brought in local conservationists and biologists to consult. Most importantly, they listened. Town halls were no longer battlegrounds. Evelyn stood before the community, no longer guarded, no longer perfect. She answered every question, admitted past mistakes, and laid out a vision not built on profit but respect. And Andrew stood beside her, backing her up not just with facts but with quiet, steady trust. And as they worked, something else began to bloom, something quieter, deeper. After meetings, they lingered. Over lunch, they talked, not about permits or zoning, but about life. One afternoon, they hiked deep into the canyons to survey potential impact zones. Evelyn wore boots too new and carried more water than necessary, but she kept pace. Andrew pointed out burrows, ancient petroglyphs, and the nesting site of a hawk she would have walked right past. "You know everything about this place," she said, awed. "I've tried to," he replied. "I want to protect it. Not just for now, for whoever comes next." They paused beside a cliff edge as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. "I grew up without roots," Evelyn said quietly. "We moved so much I started to think I didn't need home. But I think maybe I've been looking for it all this time." He looked at her but said nothing. Later that night, they sat by a small campfire, surrounded by a stretch of desert untouched by development. The stars overhead stretched endlessly, more than Evelyn had ever seen from any rooftop in Manhattan. She pulled her knees close, her voice almost lost in the wind. After the snake bite, I thought I might die. And part of me didn't mind. I was so tired of the pressure, of smiling through boardroom knives. Andrew didn't interrupt. He just listened. She glanced at him. Then I woke up with you holding my hand. And suddenly I wanted to live again. You reminded me there's more out there than deals and deadlines. Their eyes met, longer this time, warmer. She leaned slightly forward. So did he. Then, at the last second, Andrew hesitated. He whispered, drawing back. I don't want to mess this up. Evelyn smiled, a little sad. You're not. But she didn't lean in again. The next day, Evelyn stood in front of the town for the final community presentation. She unveiled the redesigned Oasis Ridge Plan, complete with conservation corridors, wildlife impact assessments, and a significant investment into local environmental education. When she finished, the room applauded. People lined up to shake her hand. For the first time, Evelyn Harper was welcomed not as a mogul, but as someone who had truly listened. Afterward, Andrew found her leaning against a fence post outside the center, watching the last of the attendees head home. You did good, he said. So did you, she replied. They smiled at each other. It felt like something new was beginning. But that night, as Andrew returned to his station, he heard a whisper through the community grapevine. An investor rep from the Harper Group had mentioned Evelyn might be wrapping up her involvement once the final permits cleared. She won't stay, the voice had said. She's done what she came to do. Andrew stood on the porch beneath the stars, the desert stretching endlessly before him. And for the first time since they had started working together, the silence didn't comfort him. It felt like something precious was slipping away. The resort was nearly complete. Solar panels gleamed under the desert sun. Pathways curved gently through untouched brush, raised to allow wildlife to pass underneath. Observation decks had been built around nesting grounds rather than over them. It looked like a promise kept. And then the rumors came. A whisper carried from one worker to another. A corporate acquisition. A buyout. A bigger player entering the game. A multinational resort chain, famous for turning eco-retreats into luxury playgrounds, was allegedly in talks to purchase Oasis Ridge. Andrew heard it at the ranger station from a contractor who had just left the site. They say Harper's selling the whole thing, he said. It's almost a done deal. Once it's signed, the new owners can do what they want. Most of the environmental agreements aren't binding. Andrew went cold. He drove to the site without thinking, tires spitting dust, heart pounding. When he arrived, he found Evelyn near the main entrance, talking with the lead architect. She turned at the sound of his boots crunching across gravel. Andrew, she started. Is it true? He cut in, voice sharp. Are you selling this place? Evelyn blinked, startled. It's complicated. He stepped closer, face flushed with heat that had nothing to do with the sun. Complicated? You promised the community. You stood next to me and said this was different. I meant it, she said firmly. But the board, he shook his head. No more excuses. No more investors or legal teams or pressure from the top. Either you're protecting this place or you're cashing out. Her jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. Tell me you're not selling. She hesitated. And in that breath of silence, Andrew's heart cracked. You were never going to stay, were you? He said, voice dropping. You were always going to walk away. Evelyn's voice trembled. I didn't plan any of this. I never expected to care so much. But the truth is, the board is bleeding money, and the only way to stop them from gutting the conservation efforts entirely is to bring in outside funding. I'm trying to negotiate conditions, trying to keep the protections in place. You're trying, he said bitterly. But you're not fighting. I am fighting, she snapped. Every day behind the scenes, while everyone thinks I'm just sipping champagne and signing checks. I've given everything to this. You had my trust, Andrew said, backing away. And you broke it. Again. Her eyes filled, but she did not speak. I won't be part of this, he said quietly. I won't watch you sell out everything we built. He turned and walked away. Andrew, please, but he kept going. That night, a ranger returning from the site handed Andrew a small envelope. She asked me to give this to you. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single handwritten page. Andrew, I do not know how to explain the storm I live in every day. The deals, the numbers, the people who only see land as profit. I have fought for every tree, every drop of water on this project. But the truth is, I'm running out of leverage. When you found me in the desert, I thought I might die, and a part of me didn't mind. But then you came along, calm, grounded, real. You reminded me that I could be more than the title I wear, that I could build something that meant something. And I've tried, Andrew. I've tried to change. For you, for the land, for myself. But maybe I was foolish to believe I could do it all. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Not good enough. Not what you thought I was. I'm sorry. For failing. For hurting you. For not being enough. Evelyn. Andrew read it once, then again. Not enough. No, that was not it. She had been too much, carrying more than anyone should, wearing armor while trying to build bridges. And maybe, in his fear of being hurt again, he had looked for betrayal where there was only survival. He dropped into the chair on the porch, staring out into the dark. The wind was still. The kind of stillness that came before everything changed. He stood up, grabbed his keys. He had to find her. Before it was too late, Andrew drove faster than he had in years. The highway stretched endless under the blazing Nevada sun, the Ranger truck kicking up dust as he pushed toward the airport. His fingers gripped the wheel tightly, his mind racing even faster. She was leaving. Evelyn Harper, who had fought for the desert beside him, who had stood before the community and promised a better future, who had looked at him under the stars like maybe, just maybe he was her home, was walking away because he had not trusted her when it mattered most. In the passenger seat was the only thing he had brought, a photograph. Slightly wrinkled, printed from his own dusty home printer. It showed him and Evelyn standing at the edge of a canyon at dusk, smiling without posing. Unaware the camera had caught them. It had been taken by a student volunteer during one of their early exploration trips. And somehow, that moment felt like the purest version of them, before doubts, before pressure, before fear had broken everything apart. At the airport, he barely found a parking spot before sprinting through the sliding glass doors, breath short, heart pounding. He scanned the departure screens. She had to be here. She had to still be here. And then there, near gate 6, her coat, her hair pulled back, her suitcase by her feet. She looked tired, but calm, too calm. "Evelyn," he called out. She turned, startled. He walked straight to her, slowing only when he reached her. "Don't go." She blinked, the shock in her face giving way to something unreadable. "I thought," she began. "I was wrong," Andrew cut in. "I was scared, and I let that speak louder than what I knew about you." He swallowed hard. "You didn't owe me anything. You didn't have to explain, or fight the way you did. But you did, and I threw that away. I thought I was protecting the desert. I didn't realize I was tearing down the one person trying hardest to save it." Evelyn stared at him, silent. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photo. "This is where we started," he said, holding it out. "Two people who didn't expect to find anything, and found each other anyway." Her hand trembled as she took the photo, eyes misting. "I'm not here for the resort," he said. "I'm here for you. If you're leaving because you think you're not enough, because you think you failed me, don't." He took a step closer. "You're more than enough. You're the reason I started believing again." She looked at him, lips parting, eyes brimming with tears. "I wasn't going to run," she whispered. "I was flying to San Francisco to terminate the deal. I fought the board. I bought us time. I just didn't want to stay in town while people looked at me like I'd failed." Andrew reached for her hands. "You didn't fail. You stayed. You fought. And now I want to fight with you." Her tears fell then. Quiet, grateful. "I was so sure you hated me," she said. "I hated what I thought you were. But I forgot who you really are." They stood there, surrounded by people and movement. And yet it felt like everything else had gone still. Evelyn laughed softly through her tears. "You know we're being stared at, right?" "Let them stare," Andrew said, pulling her into his arms. She didn't resist. In the middle of the terminal, with flight announcements echoing above, they held each other like it was the only thing keeping either of them upright. "I want to stay," she said into his chest. "In the town, in the desert, with you." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Then stay." She nodded, the photo still clutched in one hand. "I will." Weeks later, the Oasis Ridge Resort opened quietly, without fanfare. No red carpets. No champagne fountains. But it was ready, and it was right. Raised boardwalks wound through preserved terrain. Guest rooms ran on solar energy. A portion of every booking funded local conservation projects. And at the heart of it all stood a small educational center built in partnership with the wildlife station. The media called it revolutionary. Andrew called it healing. Evelyn, now a resident of the town, stepped back from the Harper Group board and focused on sustainable development and preservation. She and Andrew co-led new initiatives, habitat restoration, youth education, even a new scholarship for environmental science majors. People started calling them the heart of the desert. They just smiled and got back to work. At night, they walked the trails they once walked as strangers, sometimes hand in hand, sometimes in comfortable silence, but always together. And somewhere in their modest home, above the fireplace, hung a photo of a man and a woman standing under a sunset sky. At the beginning of everything, the desert was alive with color. A year had passed since the resort opened, and now, under a brilliant blue sky, laughter echoed through the canyons and across the sun-warmed sand. Tents flapped gently in the breeze. Children chased each other between booths filled with local crafts and native plant displays. And music drifted from a small stage where a folk band played songs inspired by the land itself. It was the first Desert Harmony Festival, and the whole town had come out to celebrate not just a resort, but a revival. A new chapter, a promise kept. At the heart of it all stood Andrew and Evelyn, side by side beneath a canopy of hand-woven fabric dyed in desert tones. People greeted them with hugs, handshakes, and heartfelt words. Thank you for believing in this place. You gave us back our home. You showed us what real change looks like. They smiled, humbled by the love around them. Later in the afternoon, Andrew leaned into Evelyn and whispered, "Let's sneak away for a bit." They slipped away from the crowd and hiked up a familiar path, the same trail where fate had collided with fear and turned it into something beautiful. The path had been reinforced since then, with markers for wildlife sightings and benches made of reclaimed wood. As they walked, Evelyn reached for his hand. "You know," she said, "I still remember how scared I was that day. Everything hurt. I thought I was going to die out here." Andrew squeezed her hand. "And I thought I was just finding another lost hiker. Turns out I was finding my entire life." They stopped at the very spot she had collapsed from the snake bite, now marked by a small stone cairn with a plaque that read, "The beginning of something bigger." Evelyn laughed. "We should put up a warning, beware of fate and fangs." Andrew grinned, then reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this for a while," he said, pulling out a small velvet pouch. Evelyn's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, and set with a smooth piece of desert jasper. Earth-colored, sun-warmed, and shaped by time. "I didn't want anything fancy," he said. "Just something made from the place that brought us together." He dropped to one knee, the desert wind lifting his words. "Evelyn Harper, you've changed this town, this land, and me. Will you marry me, not just here, but in every trail, storm, and sunrise that's ahead?" Tears filled her eyes as she laughed and nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they held each other there, under the same sky that had once nearly taken her from him, and instead had given them everything. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mesas and the sky turned to lavender and gold, Andrew and Evelyn stood atop a nearby hill. Below them, the resort glowed gently in the fading light, more sanctuary than spectacle. Beyond it, the desert stretched wide and endless. They stood in silence for a while, wrapped in each other's arms. "You think it'll last?" Evelyn asked softly. Andrew looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "The land will, and so will we, as long as we keep listening to it and to each other." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. Together, they watched the lights flicker on in the town, the soft pulse of a future shaped not by wealth or power, but by trust, forgiveness, and a love resilient enough to weather any storm. Because they had learned something simple and true, happiness, real happiness, is not in what you build, but in who you build it with. And in the hearts that never stop trying to protect what matters most. In the heart of the desert, two strangers crossed paths, one seeking escape, the other seeking purpose. What they found instead was a love strong enough to restore not only a fragile ecosystem, but their own hearts. Andrew and Evelyn's journey is a reminder that true love is not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It is about trust, forgiveness, and the courage to stay when it would be easier to walk away.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.